cut these down into chunks for you so they're not so overwhelming. Okay, we're going to talk about what the different ways in which species kind of fulfill their role within an environment. And so the first one is our generalist. And a generalist essentially is a very flexible type of organism. So they can live in lots of different places, they can eat a wide variety of foods, they can tolerate lots of conditions. They're broad. These guys are survivors. So here you have three different organisms that are survivors. And Justin Timberlake is our representative of humans for this one because this guy can do it all, right? He can sing, he can dance, he can act, he's funny. He's going to be a survivor no matter what. Notice that we are, as humans, are very adaptable in our environment because we can shelter, we can wear clothing, and we also eat a lot of different kinds of foods, and we very well adapted to different kinds of environments. Our good old friends that travel along with us, our raccoon and our flies, they love the way we live, and they're gonna be around. So we're survivors. On the other hand, are our specialists. These are very picky, right? Like they have a very limited habitat, a limited diet. They can't tolerate many degrees and change in temperatures. And so the problem with these guys is that they are very susceptible to extinction if there's change. Unfortunately, our little koala bear down here, after the big wildfires in Australia, has been declared to be functionally extinct. And this is extremely bad news. What that means is that that little koala bear has lost its habitat, like that fire did him in. We still have koalas living in zoos, and we have them living in people's yards or whatever, but they don't have a habitat for living in the wild. That has to change, and Australia is really hurting right now. They've made some bad choices, just like the U.S. has, and there's some things that are really, really in jeopardy in Australia. The big panda bear is another one who really limited diet. They like their bamboo, just like the koala likes eucalyptus, and so that limited diet and their limited range makes them very susceptible to extinction. And then Kylie Jenner. I'm moving on. All right, a habitat. This is the place in which the species live. So habitat is a big deal because when we talk about different species, the place in which they live has to be protected. It is just as important as the species itself. And this is something that a lot of people really don't comprehend. We have to take care of habitat. If we want species around in their natural setting, we have to protect the natural setting. All right, competition. So a species will fight for resources. And there's a little graphic here to show you that when niches overlap, usually what happens is they're going to either have to partition it off. So some ways in which partitioning happen are things like they may hunt the same kinds of animals, for example, but maybe one does it at night and one does it during the day. So that's a type of partitioning that happens so that species can live in the same niche. But no one can survive in the same exact niche at the same exact time. They're going to have to find a way to partition those things off. And that's actually quite interesting little phenomenon. Okay, an indicator species. So when something goes wrong in an ecosystem, it's usually the indicator species that tell us that something's wrong. And so one of the famous environmental books that was written in the 1960s was called Silent Spring, and it essentially used birds to say the birds are sounding an alarm. They're telling us that by their non-presence in this particular case, their non-presence means that that they're going to that we're in trouble, right? So and the example of the trout, and we'll look at clean water quality. And so trout need a lot of oxygen, and if the oxygen levels get too low, that spells trouble for them, which then has a rippling effect up the food chain. So those are called trophic cascades, and we'll talk about those here in just a little bit. A keystone species. Now, all of you should know by now what a keystone species is. It is the one species that, if they're there, it makes a huge difference. Now, if there are too many, it's unbalanced. If there aren't enough, it's unbalanced. So some big keystone species, and it doesn't matter about size. It also doesn't matter if they're plants or animals. Like the giant kelp off the coast of California is considered to be like a keystone species. And some of you in your projects also had plants as keystone species. The American alligator was hunted down because people were afraid of it. And then we realized that we'd made a huge mistake. And that's usually, unfortunately, how things go. We cannot replace the pollinators. We have to have them, or else our food chain will collapse. Bad news, I told you. Okay, we're going to look at I'm going to show you a video on the wolves in Yellowstone, so I'll have that up for you. All right, species interactions. So there are 5 basic interactions: competition, predation, mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. So we'll look at the differences. The first one is competition. So if you have competition between 2 different species trying to gain the same niche, then one of them's gonna win or force the other one out. Once again, our choices are adapt, migrate, or move. Interestingly enough, we've had some adaptation by some different kinds of species to human behavior. For example, the coyote and the bobcat, both of them have learned to live in urban settings. This could spell trouble for your little dog or your little cat, but the reality is that they figured out how to live with us. So there's wildlife living within urban areas, and sometimes they're more nocturnal because we're out and about during the day. A raccoon, possum, all of those are different kinds of wildlife that have adapted. Think also about how once cities started to shut down for coronavirus, how that made a difference. So, my little crystal ball here. Okay, so predation, obviously one feeding off of the other, and we're going to explore this through a little lab. So, we don't like to think about the predator, but it's extremely necessary. The predator-prey relationship is a very important one. So what do predators do to adapt? Well, they have weapons, right? Sharp teeth, thorny tails, I don't know, all kinds of, claws, beaks, things like that. Chemical warfare, so think about when they will let out their musk, and sometimes those are tree frog, for example, who can let out poison. Anything that's bright colored red is probably a warning. I taste bad and I'm going to hurt you. Camouflage, so think about the lion in the brush. And chase and ambush, so really important, the ability to run fast and to have a surprise attack. However, the prey also has its own set of ways in which it keeps the predator at bay. Things like porcupine and spiny things, turtle shells, the gazelle who's able to run really fast, or the animals that are able to either hide within their surroundings, or they can pretend to be another animal. And there's some really cool butterfly and moth larvae that are caterpillars that look like dangerous animals. and yeah, they're not, but they have big eyes or what. So that's a way in which they can adapt. And of course, chemical warfare. If you think about a skunk, he's going to spray out in order to protect himself. Oh, the rattlesnake. That was the predator with the chemical warfare. Okay. All right, parasitism, feeding off the parasite feeding off the host. Now, here's the thing, they don't want to kill you, they just want to make you miserable. So if they start to kill the host off, it's sort of what I was talking about with diseases. When you kill off the host, you kill off your reproductive source, right? So the same is true with parasites in that they really need other organisms to get their nutrients and to live. And so if they kill them, then they'll die as well. So that's one thing they don't want to do. Mutualism means that there's going to be a beneficial relationship for both. So the clownfish, for example, little Nemo there, he depends upon the anemone. He's actually immune to the stings of the anemone, but he'll help the anemone by the bright colors will attract a fish that the anemone can then eat. Remember, they're not plants. And at the same time, the clownfish gets protection. So that's a good relationship there. Commensalism means that one of them is benefiting, the other one is not. So there are plants like this one right here, this bromeliad, and a bromeliad can actually live in the crook of the tree, and the tree don't care. They don't care. But the bromeliad really flourishes in the tree. And then the barnacles, it looks like it's hurt that whale, but it's not. The whale's like, whatever. It doesn't even make it itch. So, and the barnacle gets to travel with it. So that's a mutualistic relationship. All right, that is it for those relationships. And we will stop for now. Thank you.